This may be the most powerful thing that I could share with our community today. Evil is very real, and there are forms of evil that we don't often recognize. The goal of the struggle between good and evil is to deny us our humanness. Right now, there are two parallel societies that are emerging. One of those societies is all in on everything. They'll just say, tell me what to do and I'll do it. The Bible codes are looking at the events unfolding in the Middle East, for example. There's no mention of America at all. America does not appear to exist in those future scenarios. This is a very different way of thinking. It means that our biology can be changed to meet the vision rather than asking the vision to conform to our own natural biology. None of those things are good for human life. Mm-hmm. If it's not good for human life, who's it good for?
I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion, Gregg Braden, man. How you doing?
Alex, it is so good to see you. It is so good to see you in the flesh.
Yes, same here.
I am physically in your new studio.
Yes.
At the undisclosed location. There are no markings on the building. The CIA safe house, Alex Ferrari studio, underground bunker.
Exactly.
And it's beautiful. This is truly a beautiful studio. And I want to thank you for honoring. I feel very honored. And for honoring all of your guests. I mean, they were my dear friends with this beautiful place to have these really deep conversations.
Oh, well, I really appreciate that. It has been it's such a thrill having you here. And we've done so many episodes over the years already. This is the first time we've been in person. So I'm really, really excited to.
So now what do you want to do?
I don't know. Let's. What happened when you were born? No, I'm joking.
I was born in the very early age.
I was born a small child. So I just thought of Steve Martin. I was born a young black boy.
I remember that. Well, that gives away our age a little bit.
Very much. The Jerk. That was a great movie. Great movie. So your new book is called?
I do have a new book. It was only released about 2 weeks ago. Okay. It's called Pure Human: The Hidden Truth of Our Divinity, Power, and Destiny.
So that's a very interesting idea. You've been talking about humanness for a while now, and specifically and I agree with you 110%, what society, what the powers that be, where people in power have throughout history kind of tried to put a veil over our eyes of the truth of who we truly are, our divinity. Right. Can you talk a little bit about that and what we truly are and what others are trying to do to us?
Well, yes, it is happening it has happened in history. It's happening now. The reason I wrote this book, Alex, I wrote this book to celebrate our humanness and our human divinity and a time when there's a concerted effort to denigrate our humanness, our young people in schools. Right. If anybody of our viewers have children, grandchildren, even today, so this isn't in the past, it's happening right now, they're being taught that we are a flawed species by virtue of our existence. Carbon-based life is flawed. Mm-hmm. And if we are flawed, it means that we need something outside of ourselves to become the best version of ourselves and to compete successfully in the world that makes us victims. Right. And the remedy for victimhood is a savior. And the savior now is being touted as technology. And that's no news to anybody watching this. I mean, the concerted effort to replace our natural biology with AI, artificial intelligence, computer chips in the brain, chemicals in the blood, RFID chips under the skin throughout the body. They're already being implemented in many European countries right now. Nano sensors moving through our circulatory system, sending out biometric data. All these technologies already exist. And I just want to be really clear. The technology is never good, bad, right, or wrong. It's the thinking underlying it. It's how it's being applied. Mm-hmm. So we live in a time when there's a concerted effort to replace our natural biology with technology for purposes of power and control. And that is the thinking that's underlying what's happening. So the book really, there are two parallel themes in the book, and I'm excited about both of them. One is to identify the fact that there is a concerted effort to replace our natural biology, and it has an expiration date on it. The year 2030 is the year that the powers that be are looking at least taking the first big steps of integrating us into a global data-based system run by AI. So that's the first part. The second part, the new science, Alex, the discoveries that are telling us we're only beginning to discover what it means to be human. We're about to give our humanness away before we even truly know what it means to be human. And the beauty of the discoveries is that in many cases, our own natural biology meets and often exceeds the capacity of the technology that we're being indoctrinated to accept into our bodies. We are the technology. We're a very different kind of technology. We are what was called a soft technology. So not a primitive, hard technology of like silicon chips and physical wires. We're more than that. We're neurons, DNA, cell membranes, moving ion potentials across cell walls. And the beauty of our technology. You know, many of our viewers know I worked in the defense industry during the Cold War years, and I only say that. I hesitate a little bit because I didn't know how deep we want to go with that, but I was exposed to some of the most advanced technologies that the world's ever seen, and this was in the 80s. I could only imagine where it is now during the Cold War. But one of the things I learned is that the more advanced the technology is behind the scenes, the simpler the user interface often is. You know, when you look at a smartphone, you got a smartphone right there, you take your finger and you push a picture, an icon, and you set into motion a whole cascade of events. You can pay your bills, talk to your family, and all you did was push a button. That's a very simple user interface, and we appear to work the same way. We are so sophisticated behind the scenes that our user interface are the principles identified in our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions. Our user interface is thought, feeling, emotion, belief, breath, focus, movement, nutrition. Today we call these epigenetic factors. But these are the triggers that awaken this soft technology that we have within us. And we're about to give it away to technology. And a lot of people, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and there were other scientists in the room, and they said, well, Gregg, you know, isn't it a natural part of our evolution to merge with the technology, to merge biology with silicon? Isn't that the next step in our evolution? And I said, absolutely not. I said, it is an evolution that's not natural. It is a forced evolution, and what we're not being told is the cost, the very high price that we pay as humans if we choose that route to relinquish our biology to technology. We lose some of our most cherished human attributes, including the ability to love, the ability to forgive, the ability to have empathy, sympathy, compassion, to imagine, to innovate, to create. All of these, nobody's talking about this. When we replace the biology with technology, let's say it this way. There's an adage in biology called use it or lose it. And I know many people are familiar with that. We joke about it sometimes, you know. But it's very true. So let me just give one example. When I was in school back in the 50s, 60s, early 70s, we were all the medical textbooks, biology, everything, we were taught that we come into this world with a fixed number of brain cells. And that was the joke.
Right, exactly.
And that was the leverage when you're in college. Every beer you drink, you're going to lose some brain cells.
Every joint you smoke.
Every hit you take on.
So you just get a lottery of a million brain cells. Everything you do wrong just starts to slightly.
That was what they used to say.
I remember that.
Yeah. What the new discoveries now are telling us is not true. Until the last breath we take on this earth, we are producing new brain cells through a very special part of the brain. It's called the hippocampus. But there's a catch, and the catch is the reason that I'm sharing this story. We produce the new neurons and the new brain cells unless they are engaged in a meaningful way within about 7 days, within about a week. They will atrophy and they will die because the body senses that they're not needed. If they're not used, the body senses they're not needed. That principle applies to the entire human body. It applies to the reproductive system, to the immune system, to the way that our cognitive abilities work. So when we begin replacing our natural biology with artificial and synthetic technology, our body begins, those functions that the technology is mimicking, those functions begin to atrophy, and pretty soon we lose those functions, depending on what the function is, sometimes shorter period of time, sometimes longer, in one generation. Next generation, then the epigenetics say, well, we used to do those things, but we don't need to anymore. We used to create a strong immune response, but we don't need to because the technology is doing it for us.
So, like, it's kind of like with, men of my age and your age are now taking testosterone to boost their testosterone up. But when they do that, it completely negates your own ability to create it. And now, even if you stop, you're done. The body's like, oh, I don't need to do this. You guys got this covered. I'm just going to shut down. And that's an example of that.
Perfect example. So this is what we're not being told, of this very high price that we pay as individuals and as a species if we give ourselves away to the technology. Mm-hmm. So the book, those are two parallel themes. One, that there is a concerted effort. And this isn't like way off in the future, hypothetically. I mean, it's already happening. The policies are already written. The laws are being enacted. Organizations are developing the relationships with nations to implement many of these technologies by the year 2030. 2030, it's very interesting. And we could probably do a whole program on this. That for a number of reasons, cosmological reasons, we'll talk about this when we talk about ancient civilizations. That year has been identified as the goal to implement, to remake the world in a way that we have never seen in our lifetimes. It has been identified by the United Nations, for example, has a program designed to implement 17 goals by the year 2030, called the UN SDG 2030, SDG Sustainable Development Goals. Where this is especially troubling and very concerning is that many of those goals parallel the ideas put forth by the World Economic Forum that meets in Davos every year. And they have since 1971. And I want to be clear on this. They have every right to meet and, commiserate about what the world should look like in the Davos chateaus, but where it becomes problematic, and a lot of people don't know this, their vision of the world so closely parallels the UN vision for the Sustainable Development Goals that in the year 2019, the WEF formalized an agreement with the UN. They signed it, and they publicized it. It's not a secret. Mm-hmm. They show them shaking hands, and here's the document they signed. They said there's so much synergy between our mutual visions of the world. Let's work together. So now the ideas of the WEF have the teeth and the horsepower of the UN behind them to implement into our lives. For the United States, we are legally bound to follow many of the ideas that the UN is proposing. So again, I want to be really clear on the clarity. I think clear communication is really important. I have a lot of friends at the UN. They're good people. The UN is not the organization that it used to be. It's been hijacked in some respects. And there are UNs within UNs. It's not, it's like there are companies within companies. When we look at these Sustainable Development Goals, Alex, and you can go to the website and look at them, they are beautiful goals that I would want. I mean, who wouldn't want, for example, who wouldn't want an end to poverty? Yeah. Global poverty. Who wouldn't want an end to childhood disease? Who wouldn't want to have food security for everyone in the world? That's the outward expression of the goals. Beautiful goals. Now, what few people do is you look at the fine print. How are those goals going to be achieved? And that is where it becomes a horrendous view of remaking not only the world around us, but for the first time, our technology now allows us to remake the world within us. We're having this conversation in February. Mm-hmm. The World Economic Forum just finished their 2025 Davos meetings, and they publicized the notes. And this idea was reiterated by Klaus Schwab, by their founder, that by the year 2030, they want to integrate, and these are his terms, they want to merge the physical world with the digital world with the biological world, and have all of those worlds captured onto a massive global database run by artificial intelligence. This is the goal.
It's very Borg-like.
The only way to achieve these is to create a magnitude of social change that most people are not prepared to accept in the world around us. And those people that can least afford, have the least bandwidth to absorb the shock, are the ones who are going to be hurt the most. But now they're talking about changing the world within us. And at the meetings, I think you're probably familiar with Yuval Harari. Mm-hmm. He is, for our viewers that may not be, he's a historian. He is an author. He has the ear of the World Economic Forum. He contributes technological visionary principles to the WEF. And his exact words are now that humans are what he calls hackable animals. Mm-hmm. And because we are hackable, it means that, this is a very different way of thinking, it means that our biology can be changed to meet the vision rather than asking the vision to conform to our own natural biology. So they are proposing implementing these technologies. And I have to tell you, I mean, I know it's happening. And I'm still in awe at what a good job they do with the marketing, because they make it look really slick, really sexy. So what they say is your world is safer if you have, all these RFID chips in your body linked to this database, or your life is easier. There's a YouTube video. Sweden is one of the first nations to adopt a lot of this technology. By the way, the term generally used is transhuman technology. We haven't introduced that yet. The word trans simply means beyond. So beyond human technology. So here's a video of a guy walking down the street. The sky's blue, the birds are singing, nice music.
Like a pharmaceutical ad.
Yeah, exactly. And what he says, he's never been happier and freer in his life. And the reason he is happy and free is because he has 15 RFID chips embedded into his body. So when he goes to his office, he rubs his, the RFID chip in his wrist to open the security door. And when he goes to the bank, the RFID chip, accesses his ATM account. He goes to the grocery store and goes to get into his car. And an RFID chip actually starts the ignition on his car. And I mean, this is just one example. One example of how the marketing, if you're a young person looking at this, you're saying, why not? Why wouldn't I want this? Or computer chips in the brain. Elon Musk has a company, Neuralink. It's been around for a while, and people are only now beginning to know what it means. And Neuralink is a computer chip in the brain that links directly to the computer without any cables or keyboards, so that you are interfacing with your computer. And I've been in audiences with young people who have never been taught what it means to be human and how rare and precious our lives are, and the sacredness of the gifts that we were given, because we are not the product of natural evolution. We are the product of an intentional act. We can talk about that in a few minutes. Yeah. But they don't know any of that. They have been taught that we're a flawed species and we need technology. So to them, and what they say to me, they say, wait a minute, Gregg. Actually, they call me Mr. Braden. Wait a minute, Mr. Braden. And I said, no, please call me Gregg. Mm-hmm. They said, you're telling me if I get a chip in my brain, I can play Grand Theft Auto with no keyboard and no cables? And I say, yeah, that's pretty much it. And they say, sweet, bring it on.
Sign me up.
Why not? Now, Elon Musk just had a press conference a couple of weeks ago. Maybe you saw this. And the media, it was a press conference for mainstream media about Neuralink. And they said, well, who is going to want that chip? The way the chip works is they actually remove a section of the brain, the skull, that's about the size of a quarter is why I'm showing that. Take the bone out, and there's a place between the bottom of the skull and the top of the brain. There's a natural space that's there. Mm-hmm. And the chip is there, and then it's 1,024 little fiber optic probes that go into the neocortex. They go down into the brain, and they capture the signals between the synapses, bring them up to the chip. The chip is then processing and then sending that through wireless technology to a receiver.
Wow.
And so the press said, well, who's going to want a piece of their skull taken away? And Elon Musk, and this is the first time I heard this, he said, oh, you don't have to do that anymore. He said, now we can do it by circulating nanobots in the body.
Oh, that's better.
So you don't have to have this chip actually in the brain. It can be in the body doing this thing. And this is what they're going to push this as far as they can until someone reels it in, until someone pushes back on this.
But the thing I find fascinating about this whole topic, Greg, is that you know as well as I do. Imagine if transhumanism started in 1985.
Sure.
And instead of a small little chip, we have this giant thing hooked up because that's what the technology was able to.
Yeah.
So if you get all of this stuff now, the nanotechnology that's available now, where do you think it's going to be in 5 or 10 years? You're going to have old tech running. You're going to have, a Mac Classic, or a DOS machine running in your body. Yeah. So that's the thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If it's something exterior, that you could like our wearables. We have wearables, we have a ring.
Wearables, completely different story.
Right. But that's, so that as the technology changes, you can change.
Right.
But to have it permanently in your body, to me, maybe I'm just an old guy, sounds insane. If you told me, hey, we have a Neuralink, you put it on your head or it's in your glasses, I'm super cool, fine. Like as you were telling me, like, oh yeah, you do this and you do that. I'm like, well, we kind of do that with our phone already. We kind of do that with our watch already. Yeah. Why need to insert it into the body?
Well, this is part of a deeper story, and I don't know how deep we want to go with this right now.
As deep as you like, sir. You know how I like.
There's a part of our story that's missing, and in mainstream, and it's a part of our story that a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about. I've lost friends having this conversation because it's something that brings a level of reality to our lives that just a lot of people don't want to look at. I'm a systems thinker. I'm a scientist trained as an earth scientist. Primary degree is in geology, geophysics, with a strong background in life sciences, math, physics, computer science, and cosmology. And I say that because that training affords a scientist a way of thinking and a way of accessing information. I mean, there's a skill as well as an art to reading technical journals. You don't want to read every word, but there's a way to cull, what it is that's being said in those journals. So I say that because I have had the opportunity to stay current with all the new discoveries and the new technologies. The piece that's missing as a systems thinker goes to the very top, to the big picture, just to see, what's going on, and then zero, like on the nanosecond of today to see where that fits. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of people come to me in our events and they say, Greg, isn't it interesting how the world's changing, all these things happening all at the same time, how all the technology and the wars and the collapse of borders and governments, and isn't that interesting how it's all happening at the same time? What a coincidence. Well, it's not a coincidence. There's a structure, there's a process that we are in that very few people are aware of on the levels that we're going to talk about. And because we're in it, the only way out of it is to go through it. We're in a process. So what I'm going to describe, it's not like 50 years down the road. We're in this right now. Our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions have always told us that we are engaged in a fundamental struggle between what some people call light and dark, the polarities, and light and dark is expressed in our lifetimes as good and evil. Mm-hmm. So we all hear about that, we talk about it, and it means different things to different people. Evil is very real, and there are forms of evil that we don't often recognize. The goal of the struggle, and this is the piece that's missing, the goal of the struggle between good and evil is to deny us our humanness and to deny us an expression of our humanness, Alex, that we call divinity. Now, divinity, I've learned, means different things. Different people has a lot of baggage associated with it for some people. A lot of people link it to religion. It doesn't have to be related to religion. If you look at the contemporary definition right now, divinity simply means I'm doing this from memory is why I'm looking here. Looking at my screen. Divinity is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. And that's it. We've talked about this a little bit in some past programs. Transcend means to become more than. So you don't just squeak by. It means you become more than the challenges that life brings to your doorstep, more than the disease in the body, more than the disastrous relationship, more than the wrecked financial systems, whatever it is. We become more than. But this next part's fascinating. Perceived limitations. We are living, most probably all of us are living in our lives, limitations that are not even real. They're not ours. They're ideas that we have been indoctrinated to accept by others, from very well-meaning friends and family have always believed that we have these limits, to obsolete science, to religion, society, culture tells us, oh, you can't do these things, or you never be able to do these things. Divinity is the ability to become more than those perceived limits. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. Divinity frees us from fear. When we live the best version of ourselves, we are free from the fear that is used as leverage that keeps us very vulnerable to the ideas and the agendas of other people. This 2030 agenda, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of agendas that are out there. 2030 is only, UN SDG 2030 is only one of those. When we live our divinity is where our healing begins. It's very difficult to heal the body without accepting the possibility that our body can heal. If we believe it can't, most probably it will not. Divinity is where our empathy, our sympathy, our compassion, our imagination, our creativity, our innovation, all of these expressions of our humanness that we cherish, these are all expressions of divinity. The goal of the struggle between good and evil, the goal is to deny us our divinity. The goal of the evil is to keep us locked in fear, to keep us feeling hopeless and powerless and helpless. All right? When we begin to replace our natural biology with synthetics, we are relinquishing our ability to access our human divinity. Divinity is directly linked to human biology. And we can talk about the science of why that is. Without our natural biology being able to access these divine expressions, we're still alive, you're still a human, but you lose the ability for love, for forgiveness, for empathy, sympathy, compassion. And these again, this is what sets us apart from all other forms of life.
Greg, let me ask you.
Yeah.
There was, I had a channel on a while ago, and she was able to channel the future. I found this fascinating. I'm bringing this up, not to go too full woo on this, but she was mentioning the year 2300, and she was channeling someone from the future version of ourselves. And I only bring this up because a lot of what you're saying was brought up, that there was three groups of people in this country, that the U.S. had broken up into basically three countries.
Yeah.
So there's the West, there's the Northeast, and then there's the South, and they all were very different. The people in the Northeast, like the New York, New England, that whole area that became its own country, they were all about augmenting with technology. Then there was I confuse it, the West was all about keeping it pure, keeping it natural. And I think the South was something either in between or closer to the North was all of that. Is that a future that makes sense to you? I mean, it's a terrifying one, I think, for me.
Well, so let's go back. This idea of good and evil. This is the missing piece. It's the context for every speaker you will have at this seat where I am. Every channel, every time we zero in on ancient civilizations or we zero in on relationships, they're all about us and about us learning something about ourselves to awaken the deep truth of our humanness and to choose whether or not we claim or relinquish our humanness. What I see happening, it's already happening. Right now, there are two parallel societies that are emerging. One of those societies is all in on everything. They'll just say, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they will trust every organization, they'll trust every government because they believe that those organizations and those governments love them and are working in their best interest. And we saw this happen over the last few years. People all in on everything. I lived in a rural community. My wife and I lived in a rural community in northern New Mexico. Not Mexico, New Mexico. And when I go to my little food co-op to buy my groceries in between trips is where I connect with my community. Most of them are working multiple jobs. They don't have time for this kind of a conversation. They don't know everything that we're talking about. But what they do know is this. They say, Gregg, something's wrong. The world's changing too fast. It's that the changes are happening to us, not coming from us, and we need to get back to the basics. So what they're doing is, most of them, and the estimates now are about 40% of families from Albuquerque north to the Colorado border have pulled their young people out of public schools, and they're homeschooling their kids to teach them the values that they cherish as a family and the skills that they'll actually need and can use in the world. Not an esoteric skill, but how to maintain the family farm, the family ranch, how to work a checkbook, how to do finances, things like that. They're growing their own food. They rarely will go to a full-on medical doctor. They will go to a healthcare practitioner who is maybe more with natural and herbal health and things like that. And they're rejecting the technology. So those two parallel societies are emerging right now, but that's unsustainable. You can't do that forever. I suspect what will happen is that we're going to do what humans naturally do. We're going to check each other out. And we're going to say whose lives are more fulfilled, who's healthier, whose kids are better adjusted, who's happier in life. And the answer to that is where I think most people will end up. And my sense is that we will find a middle ground of allowing, and this is going to be really important, allowing the technology to serve us without allowing the technology to enslave us. And this is a very important conversation when we talk about AI. We could do a whole program just on the AI. As far as what that means for America, there are many, many, many projections of that America does not survive until the year 2030 as a union of 50 states. And this comes from the Bible codes, the Torah codes that have been so accurate about everything. I mean, every war, every nation, we've talked about this in some of the other programs, assassinations, everything. When the Bible codes are looking at the events unfolding in the Middle East, for example, there's no mention of America at all. America does not appear to exist in those future scenarios. People like Martin Armstrong, the economist, have certainly, his computer model, AI based, it's called Socrates, it's been around since the 80s, says that America probably goes into some form of civil war around the year 2027 and does not survive as a union. What's driving that civil war? It's internal. It's not a foreign nation attacking us. We destroy ourselves because of our beliefs. And what you're describing, I think, is a powerful catalyst in that. It's not just politics. It's about the way we think of ourselves and our relationship to the world and our relationship to life. And I've seen the same models. America becomes, there's a progressive America, there's a conservative America. But here's the part I like, because I live in New Mexico. Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico they're so sparsely populated.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
It's like nobody cares. It's like no man's land.
Yeah.
And it becomes like the Wild West. Truly like the Wild West is what they say.
I've been in all of those places. It's
me
wide
too.
open, and
That's why I live there.
yeah, it's wide open. It's kind of like it's a no man's. Well, they call those the flyover states.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. So but I'm going to come back. This fundamental battle between good and evil. When we think of a battle, we often think of forces coming together. Force against force. And this is an old idea. And if we think of our relationship to good and evil as fighting the evil, that's what keeps us stuck in the fear that separates us and keeps us locked into that pattern. This is going to sound strange. We don't want to win this battle. We want to triumph in the battle. And there's a difference between winning and triumph. Triumph, the goal of evil, is to deny our divinity, to deny us the ability to love and forgive and heal and imagine and innovate and create and to share ideas with one another. Mm-hmm. All right, so now I'm going to offer, this may be the most powerful thing. I'm going to look at that's the camera right there. Yeah. This may be the most powerful thing that I could share with our community today, because we need a benchmark to know what evil is in the world. We have this nebulous concept. Mm-hmm. When we are asked to do anything that denies our divinity, that is an expression of evil. Evil is anything that denies our divinity, anything that denies our ability to heal, our ability to love, to forgive, to imagine,
to think,
to innovate, to create, to communicate and share our ideas freely is an expression of evil. And I'm saying that because between now and the year 2030, we are going to be coerced, we're going to be indoctrinated, we're going to be mandated in some cases to make changes in our lives, and we're going to ask ourselves, because this is new, this is uncharted territory, we're going to say, is this good for me? Is it good for my family? And I want our community, my family, my global family, I want you to have a benchmark. Whatever you're asked to do, does it affirm or deny your divinity? And the answer to that tells you what you need to know. How you act is a very personal choice. I wouldn't begin to tell someone how to act. But at least you're consciously knowing that you are either supporting or denying that evil in your life. There are many forms of evil. Kinetic evil is what's happening on the battlefields in Europe and the Middle East. We all know that. Psychological evil is prevalent right now. Anything, social media, anything that creates fear, that creates suspicion when we are made to be suspicious of one another, that makes us feel powerless and that we're not worthy, that is a form of psychological evil. Spiritual evil. And this is a really key component of what we're talking about. Because what we're talking about now, it's not sustainable. We're going to get through this. We will all get through this. You and I should come back in 2031. We'll have a reunion episode, and we'll see how we did. We're going to get through it. But this is the spiritual question. What do we become as we go through this process? As we are pushed to change our lives and our world and to embrace technology into our bodies, what does it make us become? Do we allow the events of the world to drive us to the most primal instincts of something we would never choose to be in a million years? Just for example, I know this would probably never happen, but let's say there was an election in a country that divided a country.
Stop it.
I know. It could never happen. But if it did, do we allow the narratives around that election to trigger within us primal instincts of hate and revenge and anger? And if so, recognize it, own it, and bless it and transcend it, because that is an expression of evil. That is a psychological evil. But here's the thing, the spiritual battle. We'll get through this. The question is, what have we become? And this is where the difference between winning and triumph comes in. The way that we triumph over evil is by living the best version of ourselves, by living our divinity, by imagining freely, sharing the ideas, loving without fear, forgiveness without the expectation that somebody's going to watch us in our forgiveness and acknowledge us, not being afraid to empathize, sympathize, and have compassion for our brothers and sisters. Those are all expressions of divinity. All right. When we live those, if the goal of evil is to deny us our divinity, by living our divinity, we have triumphed over evil without fighting against evil, if that makes sense. Now, there is an inner warrior, and sometimes we have to fight. Usually we can nip these things in the bud and we don't have to fight. If we don't nip them in the bud when they come up, whether it's in a relationship or in a national election, if we don't nip the problems in the bud and we allow them to move to fruition, then sometimes you do have to fight. The question is, when we fight, what is the motivation? Do we fight because of our love for the family that stands behind us and what we know is possible in our hearts? Or do we fight because of our hate for the enemy that we perceive in front of us? The outcome might be the same, but we have become something very different in getting to that outcome. This is the spiritual battle that's going on. Do we allow the events of the world to drive us to become something that we would never choose to become in a million years? That is evil prevailing. If we allow the events to make us into hateful people, and to make us into people that criticize our friends and neighbors and want revenge because of what somebody, get evenness. Those are expressions of evil, the denying of our divinity. So these are principles to be aware of. Back to the topic of the book, the idea of replacing our biology, our natural biology, with technology denies us expressions of our divinity. When we have chemicals in our bodies that mimic our immune system, or we have computer chips in the brain that are doing the work that our brain would typically do, and we begin to atrophy those principles, these are all expressions of evil. So what we're witnessing, and I'm not saying that everyone on all the levels of all the organizations, the government, are even aware of this conversation. Most of them are unconscious pawns in a scheme that has been going on since before we ever got here. Here's what I mean by that. If an individual has a propensity for greed or power and control, very naturally they're going to fall into the organizations that perpetuate that greed, power, and control, because it doesn't mean they're evil. That's their nature. They are supporting evil principles. So you can support the evil principles without, I think, being an evil person, because you're unconscious. You're not aware of what you're doing. Well,
isn't that how the greatest evils in the world have been perpetrated?
Exactly.
You turn an entire country to do something horrible.
But there are some that know exactly what I'm beating around the bush a little bit. I've worked with some UN organizations, and there's some really good people. And I still have good friends in the UN who mean well and want to do good things in the world. And in those committees, there are people like that. There are other people who are very naive and just believe what everyone tells them and want to be relevant in the events that are unfolding in the world. And there are some people that know exactly what they're doing. And you look them right in the eye, and you know, and they know that you know exactly what it is that they're trying to do and what they're supporting. Wow. And for that reason, I don't work with those organizations anymore. And I've written letters to let them know why I'm not working with those organizations. I cannot support the principles that deny our humanness and our divinity that they are spending their life energy to implement. As a matter of fact, I would, with my last breath, I will work to defeat those principles because I think we're worth it. I think our humanness is worth preserving in an era when we're being told that we're being obsolete, becoming obsolete, and that we need to allow this brave new world of integrating biology into this digital landscape. I mean, this whole concept it's called tokenization. It's the tokenization of all natural resources. So we now have the ability. We can digitally represent every elephant remaining on Earth today, all the fish in the ocean. They can give a digital ID to every fish in the ocean, all the mineral resources. They can do that. They can digitally represent all the water in the oceans and rainfall. They can do that. Now they want to digitally represent our humanness. And when you run all that into a database and AI is running that database, that is what determines what you can and cannot do in the world, where you travel, where you don't travel, what you eat, what you don't eat, what resources you utilize, what you consume, and if you consume too much, if you travel too much, if you are supporting ideas that are not aligned with this way of thinking, all of that is what comes up in these databases. And this is why when they say we need to merge our physical, our digital, and then they say, and of course, our biological worlds.
But isn't that what's happening in China right now?
China is a very interesting case history. Yeah. A lot of people don't know this. United States companies built the systems,
of course,
that are implemented in China right now. Google and Facebook primarily built the systems that are being used to run Chinese societies as a beta test, essentially. Mm-hmm. So they have the social credit scores. Yeah. Every citizen, I don't have a phone here, but every citizen is given a smartphone with an app loaded onto it, and they are all represented in a database. And if they get behind on child support, or they owe taxes, or they haven't paid a speeding ticket, or they have said something in social media against the Chinese Communist Party, or a local official, or something like that, all of those are monitored by AI. And if you say something or do one of those things, you get a ding on your social credit score. Well, here's where this is important. Every grocery store, every bus that you want to enter, when you enter the train, you want to get on a plane, you want to go to a movie theater, something like that. There's a reader, and you have to show your phone, and the phone has, it's very simple. It's either red, green, or yellow. And if you get a red that pops up, you are denied access to society until you remedy whatever it is that's being shown. We developed that, we being United States technology. China is beta testing it, and now Europe is accepting it. And what we are seeing, Alex, is Europe is pressuring, the EU is pressuring America to get with the program for consistency of travel and finance and things like that. And you're seeing America is not wired that way. We don't think that way. We're not set up for it. And you're watching America push back. And this is very interesting to see how it's going to play out. I think the powers that be they're going to push it as far as they can. America's pushing back, but they're not going to push back altogether. And if you look closely, even the new administration, you look at where the technology is leading in terms of the centralization of finance, CBDC, central bank digital currencies. I know you've had people on here talking about those. Mm-hmm. And about social credit systems and the freedom to communicate and share ideas through social media, and how much of that is regulated, how much of it's fact-checked, the whole idea of fact-checking that so many of my community support, what they don't know, is that what that means is if a statement is made that is counter to what is commonly accepted, doesn't mean it's true. It's what's commonly accepted. Then it's called a false statement. So where does that come from? Well, the AI goes out into the internet, mm-hmm. and what is the narrative that's driven in the internet? Climate change is a perfect example. As a geologist, and we've talked about this, climate change is a fact. Humans are not causing climate change. Mm. But that is the narrative that has been driven for financial and political and economic purposes. And so if you say anything against that, mm-hmm. that humans are not the cause, and by the way, NASA has released the papers saying that over 90% of the CO2 is coming from the oceans. So I think most people know, basic chemistry, colder water holds more gas. Mm-hmm. CO2 is a gas. As the oceans warm, they cannot hold as much CO2. It's called outgassing. And so the oceans are releasing the CO2 into the atmosphere. Here's the kicker. The oceans are warming from underneath up. not from the top down. If they were warming if the atmospheric CO2 was warming the oceans from the top down, you would see the warmer temperatures there. It's happening from the bottom up because there is a process. I've got YouTube videos on this on my channel. There's a process, a very unusual process, but it happens sometimes within the mantle and the inner and the outer core of the Earth. Last time we saw this was about 12,000 years ago during a time called the Younger Dryas.
Yeah, of course.
It's very well known in archaeological terms, where the magma is pushing up against from the mantle into the crust in weak places and where the crust is thin, and their process is driving that. But the point is, the oceans are warming from underneath, releasing that CO2. So humans are not the only cause. But if you ask the AI, or if you go out and ask, I did an experiment with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT told me that humans were the cause of the high levels of CO2. Then we have national leaders who come on television and say that the science is settled, discussion is over. Well, science is never settled. It is designed, it's a living body of information designed to be constantly updated as new information comes to light. If science is going to be relevant in our lives, we have to allow it to be updated. And this is what the science is showing, but this is not the narrative. So a fact check would go out across the internet and take a consensus of whatever is out there and would say that that is false. If you say that humans are not the sole cause of climate change, it's going to say it's false.
It's similar, like the Earth is flat. That the whole conspiracy theory that the Earth is flat. I know you snicker, I snicker as well. I think it's ridiculous.
Have you had any flat Earth guests on?
No, they've wanted to come on, but I'm not going to play that game. I don't want to.
I am amazed at how serious some of them are.
No, some of them have died because they put themselves in a rocket to prove.
Yep.
They've been like, just look, there's a curvature anyway. But if let's say that gained enough steam online, you could ask then ChatGPT, is the Earth round or flat? And it goes, well, according to everybody that's online, it's flat.
Exactly. So this is the way that the AI is working right now. Anyway. So these are all ideas that this is an example of psychological evil when we are led through software algorithms to accept and believe ideas that support a certain narrative that aren't necessarily good for us. And this is what divides families. It divides, you could be sitting at a dinner table. There's something called information silos, and this is the way the algorithms work. If I go to Google, I was doing some research last night on ancient Sumeria, and so I'm Googling Sumeria. All of a sudden, my inbox is flooded with all kinds of YouTube videos and articles about Sumeria that I didn't ask for. All right, so I am now inundated with all of this. It makes it look like everybody's seeing the same thing, but they're not.
Correct.
So if you're at a family dinner table and the kids are Googling one thing and the parents are Googling something else, they're going to get two very different ideas of a worldview, and both of them believe that what they've seen is so true because it's so prevalent. Everybody must be seeing the same thing. These are the ideas. This is how the ideas are used to break social bonds and drive families apart. And we saw it happen, not just in politics, but we did see it happen during this most recent presidential election. I know couples have gotten divorced since this happened, and the kids are upset with their parents because the parents voted a certain way, and the kids in their schools were taught that what their parents voted for was the worst thing that could ever happen, and
vice versa. Yeah. It's fascinating, this idea of the echo chamber, the social media echo chambers. You go down a rabbit hole and you just fed the same thing again and again and again and again and again. And it's just, you think that that's the only thing. So on an empathetic point of view, I kind of understand why people just, if they believe that that's the worldview and you come to me like the sky is purple, no, the sky is blue. And then you got Uncle Bob, no, the sky's red. But if you only see purple skies, when someone's like, you're insane and you're this or that, and that's just I'm using the sky as an example, but when you get into politics, when you get into religion, you get into medicine, medical, all this kind of stuff, it gets so heated. It's destroying society.
Well, so again, I'm going to come back. There's a context to this whole conversation. Evil has many expressions. Psychological evil, there's emotional evil, there's kinetic evil that we talked about, there's spiritual evil, and there's technological evil. The technology that we're talking about is used to break the social bonds that have always held families, communities, societies, nations, and even a world together. There's a concerted effort to break those social bonds, and it sadly, it is working to a greater degree. Our societies are fractured over conversations of, this all started right around 2011, the Occupy movement. It was the rich against the poor, 1% against 99%. Does that disparity exist? Absolutely. Do we need to talk about it? Absolutely. Could we use that as a conversation to help heal that disparity and bring us together closer as a nation, as communities? Yes, but that's not what happened. What happened is that disparity was weaponized to break the social bonds and to divide us. And it didn't stop there. There was the rich against the poor. Then there was the whole thing, men against women, the Me Too movement. Very important conversations that could have helped us to heal, but were used divisively, weaponized. Then there's Christians against the Muslims, Jews against the Muslims, blacks against the whites, men against women. And now we're having the same gender conversations, blurring the lines of gender, blurring the lines of male and female.
It's everywhere.
All important, but it's systematic. Alex, here's the thing. It's systematic, and what's happening is from a greater level where we're talking about nations now down to our own bodies and our own biology, the beliefs and the bonds that have held us together are being systematically destroyed. Because when we break the social bonds, we are vulnerable as individuals. We're vulnerable and susceptible as a society to the ideas and the agendas of others. It's no accident. This is all happening in this window, driving toward this 2030 agenda to remake. Religion is where they're going next, to destroy the religious bonds. And the WEF has actually had seminars where they say we need AI to rewrite the Bible. We need, that was Yuval Harari. We need AI to create a new religion that works for everyone. And these are where these social bonds are being broken to make us vulnerable. Replacing our humanness is the piece of this that I've chosen to really step up to in this book. And it's part of a bigger conversation, obviously.
So, and to give an example, it's like if you have a tribe of people, and there's 100 people in your tribe, and then all of a sudden information starts going into the tribe that starts to separate the tribe. All of a sudden, if it's men versus women, it weakens them. If it's boys versus girls, it weakens them. Sure. If it's young versus old, it weakens them. And then all of that, it starts to weaken to the point where someone can come in and easily take them over, destroy them, whatever. But if they're united, they're much more difficult to control.
We're not united any longer. And what's happening is there have been so many lies for so long. Now the question is, what do we even believe? What do we even trust any longer? So all of this within the context of the book. And by the way, we're having conversations that I didn't put. Some of this is in the book. Some of it's not in the book because there have been developments since the book was written. These are all part of the concerted effort to replace our humanness, to make us into something we're not, and to replace our humanness with technology. By virtue of doing that, we are denying our divinity. This is an expression of evil. This is evil playing out in ways that are not always recognized, but it's the same struggle that's been going on since before we got here. You know, scientists agree we're only about 10,000 generations into our human experience. We appeared about 200,000 years ago. This struggle between good and evil, we're told, precedes that in another realm and is playing out as the chaos that we see in our world today. And I was a kid growing up in a rural community in northern Missouri. We used to joke about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The devil was the little red guy.
Yeah, of course, on the shoulder.
On the shoulder with the pointy tail, and the angel was on the other shoulder. And we didn't deny it, but we didn't give it that. We put it over here, and the rest of life was over here. And what I'm saying is, what we're talking about underlies it has defined all of human history. Every invention, the way it was applied, every discovery, every war, every development, it's all within the context. Every guest you'll ever have on this program is describing some facet of exploring or developing or discovering something about the human experience that is reflected in this struggle between good and evil. The irony, and here's the irony, the best science of the modern world is now looking at the human body, Alex, in a way that we've never done before. When I was in school, 50s, 60s, 70s, even today, we think of the human body as this soft, gooey, sticky, wet, mushy, cells subject to all kinds of failure modes and disease and illness and things like that. And that's the way biology books portray us. A few years ago, scientists began to look at the human body not from a biological perspective, but from an IT perspective, information technology. They began looking at cells as electrical circuits and the components of the cells, transistors, resistors, capacitors, photon emitters, photon receivers. All DNA stores information the way that blockchain technology stores information. In other words, we built an external expression through the blockchain technology of the world. It mimics the way information is stored in the DNA of our bodies. So they're beginning to look at us from an IT perspective, and what they're finding is that we are not what we've been told, so much more we've been led to believe, that we are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology that we talked about earlier. And in many cases, our own biology actually exceeds the capacity of the technology that we're being asked to replace our bodies with, including computer chips.
Now, I want to ask you, Gregg, you kind of hinted about this a little bit before, but this 2030 number, what ancient prophecies talk about this time? You kind of hinted about it. Can we dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know of any that identify the year 2030 as a date. Where they say in general this time, the Kali Yuga, Kali Yuga is ending now, the Mayan calendar. Interestingly, the Mayan calendar, a lot of people kind of blew that whole conversation off. I did an interview with in the year 2012, I was doing an interview with a New York radio station, commuter station. So they're, 10-minute interviews in the morning. People are driving to work.
Yeah.
And I remember in 2012, and the guy said, "What's this big deal about 2012? When are we going to see all the changes?" And then I interviewed with him at the end of 2024, same guy, and he said, "When are the changes going to stop?" But here's the thing: we're still in the 2012 phenomenon, and a lot of people don't know this. 2012 was a cosmological phenomenon that was identified by the Mayans in a way that was more sophisticated than any other indigenous traditions had been able to do. Mathematically accurate in terms of cycles and cycles within cycles, planetary alignments, our relationship to the center of our Milky Way, all of that. Amazing how we could do a whole program on how that was actually accomplished. But what a lot of people don't know is that 2012, that was the date of the alignment with the center of our Milky Way. But cosmic cycles don't stop on a dime. They don't stop at noon on a certain date. There's a buffer, and there's a mathematic formula to tell you what that buffer is. And the buffer for a 5,125-year-long cycle is a 36-year-long buffer to transition. That means 18 years before 2012 and 18 years after.
So 2030.
2030 is the end. We are now nearing the end of that 2012 window, and we are seeing the changes that were actually prophesized. When we talk about that 2012 date, the powers that be refer to something that they call the event. And we don't know exactly what the event is. And I have my personal suspicions, but what you're seeing are nations, corporations, governments jockeying for positions of power and authority to be in the best possible place before the event occurs. And I'm not saying it's like January 1st, 2030. 2030 is the date that they are given as the target date. Now, why they have chosen that date, I don't know.
Who's they?
This is everyone from the UN, and again, there is no UN. There are UNs with the UN.
Sure.
The WEF.
Got it.
A lot of governmental organizations in nations around the world, not just in America. They're all looking at that 2030 date. Cosmologically, it's the end of, truly the end, and the end of the Mayan cycle. And by definition, the beginning or the end of anything is the beginning of what comes next. So we actually enter into a new cycle in the year 2030 that is directly linked to that 2012 phenomenon. A lot of people are not aware of that. So I don't know if it's so much about a specific moment on a specific date, but that's the point, and this is why I think it's important, is when we're having these conversations, it's easy, and we talk about technology. We've been doing this since I was a kid, 50s and 60s. We used to watch science like George Jetson cartoons.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And,
Buck Rogers.
and Star Trek and, Lost in Space and all that. And these were always innovations that we said in the future, in humankind's future, this is, what we can expect.
Flying cars, all that stuff.
Well, we're in it right now. These things are not, when people are listening to this, it's not like, I'll think about this 10 years from now.
No.
These changes right now, the policies are already being written. Many of the laws are already being enacted in ways that we don't often recognize to prepare us for a very, very different world. And it's a world, in my opinion, that's not good for us because it denies our humanness, it denies our divinity, and in many cases, Alex, it denies life itself. Can I just give you an example? It's a big statement. Let me give you an example. I did an experiment at the beginning of 2024 as a geologist. That's my primary background. I had some pretty strong feelings about all the climate goals that are being proposed. And I've spent a lot of time pushing back on them. I said, what if we met those goals? What would the world look like if we met every one of those climate goals? I'd never thought about it like that. And I don't know of many people that have. Mm-hmm. And so as a geologist, I looked at this, and to my amazement, CO2, let's take carbon dioxide is the gas that they've identified. They want to push us back to 90% below the 2010 level of CO2, which would, right now we're about 420 parts per million. So let me just say that. For context, that is nowhere near the highest it's ever been on Earth. We look in geologic history, we've had, during the Cretaceous and Jurassic periods, we've had 1,000 parts per million, 2,000 parts per million. Life thrived, life was abundant, forests were green, the Earth was a little warmer, and life thrived in that warmth. The ice was pretty much gone certainly on the northern hemisphere. So we're nowhere near the warmest, and we're nowhere near the highest levels of CO2, but we're led to believe that. Now, is it higher CO2 now? Is it higher than it was 10 years ago? Absolutely. 50 years ago? Absolutely. But we're on the low end of the CO2 in terms of Earth's history, already on the low end. If we met the goals, we would be, they want to push it back to about 212 parts per million. All right? 180 parts per million is almost extinction level. 180. If our CO2 levels drop to 180 to 150 parts per million, The forests begin to die. It's not good for life.
It's not enough CO2.
Not enough CO2. Not good for life on Earth. CO2 is not like a little dial where you can fine tune a couple of clicks and then you dial it back. So look at what they're willing to move. 212 parts per million is 32 parts per million below extinction level or above extinction level. They're willing to push it back that far. So then I went to a geologic map and I said, when was the last time Earth saw those CO2 levels? And interestingly, it was during a time called the Pleistocene. It was not good for life on Earth. They want temperatures, the average global temperature right now, average, is about 56 degrees Fahrenheit. They want to drop that 10 degrees. They want to push it back. The average global temperature, 46 degrees Fahrenheit, carbon dioxide levels 212 parts per million. Last time we saw that was Pleistocene. Forests died. Extinction of large mammals was prevalent during that time. It was not good for life. It's not good for human life. Why would they want to push our climate to something that is not good for human life? And that's a big question that we could have another conversation on. But that is one example of what we're talking about here. Why the replacement of the human body with technology is not good for human life.
Gregg, you hinted at the event. What are your feelings of that? What that event might be?
I don't have a crystal ball and I don't have a hotline to
your gut. I trust your gut.
I don't have a hotline to the mothership.
Yes.
I think I want to honor the question, and I know we're probably close to the end of this conversation, and I want to do it justice. I think that we will be involved with a much greater degree of communication with life from beyond this world in that time frame. And you're seeing what you're seeing. Do we have time? Can we just break this down a little bit? So look at we just talked about climate. We're being pushed to a climate that's not good for us. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
All right. Now you look at the war. The nations of the world are being pushed to engage in levels of war that we haven't seen
since World War II.
Since World War II. But what's happening is we are depleting our resources. So the superpowers are depleting their armaments. They're saying it's going to take 3 to 5 years to replenish, for the U.S. to replenish what we have given away to Ukraine, for example. If we had to fight a war now, we would not have the armaments. We have some.
Yeah, we're good. We're still solid. But.
Here's where it gets, these are conventional weapons. And if you're out of those, you're going to resort to something else. And that's not good. So not only the armaments and the technology, but the sheer human fighting power is being diminished. So through the wars that are happening right now, we're losing the ability, superpowers are depleting one another's resources and the human power to fight wars. That's not good for us, all right? We're breaking the social bonds intentionally, not just America, this is happening across the world, that hold families and communities and societies and entire nations together, fragmenting us, shredding us, dividing us so that we are vulnerable to other agendas. That's not good for us. Now there's a concerted effort, and we're going to see this in the next 5 years, to replace our natural biology with synthetics and with technology in ways that diminish our humanness, our human capacities of love, empathy, sympathy, compassion, imagination, creativity, all of those things that diminish our access to divinity. Divinity is what frees us from fear. That's not good for us. None of those things are good for human life. If it's not good for human life, who's it good for? That's our next program. Now, does that make sense?
That makes all the sense in the world. There seems to be something on the horizon.
Incoming, absolutely something incoming.
There's something incoming. We all feel it.
We do, and this is the whole point. Even if you don't know what it is, the best way to prepare is to be the best version of ourselves. We need to be healthier.
Yep.
We need to be more awake. We need to be stronger. We need to be more loving. We need community based upon trust and love and compassion, not fear and need. We need community more than ever. And if we have that, Alex, we're good for whatever is incoming. We're going to be better off.
Right.
And so that's the whole point of why I've written this book when I have right now.
And that's what we were talking about earlier. It's the strength of the tribe. If we had the strength of the tribe, whatever comes, you're more prepared for it. But there, even people who are not listening to these conversations, I have relatives and stuff like that, and they sense it. They sense that like this world is changing. There's something in the air. We feel it. We all feel it. And I have to believe there's a cosmological connection to this too, like how the energies of the universe are aligning at this time in history. It's very Mayan in that sense. Like there's something happening that the energies of the earth are changing, right?
They're not only changing, but they're supporting us. If I were on the other end of the camera listening to this conversation, we've just covered a lot of ground. And before we close, I want to circle back.
Please.
This is why we're here. And it's not a time to be afraid. And I don't want people to be afraid of the changes. We're here because of if you're in this world right now, you're here to open the door to the next step in the evolution, the soul evolution of what it means to be human. And everyone is a part of it. We need everyone in this. Not a time to be afraid and to hate one another, but to celebrate the gift of our humanness and to awaken the extraordinary potentials that we have within us, again, that we're only beginning to understand. And those go all the way from, of course, psychic potentials and healing potentials, but it goes beyond that to the ability to communicate interdimensionally, certainly, with ourselves and with one another, and by virtue of doing that with other forms of life, and to do it without chemicals. The chemical substances can force us into focused pockets of information, but only through our natural abilities can we open the door to the broad spectrum.
Well, it was a yogi who told me, a guru that was on the show, and I asked him about the chemical, either through ayahuasca or LSD or psilocybin or something like that, ketamine, these kind of things. And he's like, well, when you use those, it's like taking a sledgehammer to a door to make a window. It's very violent. Yeah. It's very rough. And you might not be prepared for what's on the other side. When you use your own abilities through meditation and practice, you are actually installing a window that you can open freely and close, and you see a much larger picture of what you're trying to see. So it's very similar to what you said. You see this little hole that you punched in through a sledgehammer that's rough in this, but if you do it slowly through your own human ability, you can see so much more. Every one of these masters who are on the wall here, all of them did it using their own abilities inside. Even Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. What I can do, you can do, and even more. They were saying it. And this agenda that you're talking about completely goes contradictory to what the sages and the masters have said.
From a biblical perspective, for those, people who are biblically inclined, as an amateur archaeologist, I've spent a lot of time, ancient temples all over the world. And one of the common themes is whenever our ancestors built temples, they typically built them in layers, with the innermost layer housing the deepest secrets and the greatest mysteries to protect. Our biblical traditions tell us that we are the temple. They literally say, I think it's 1 Corinthians 3:16. I'm looking up, doing this from memory. 1 Corinthians 3:16, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwells within you. As temples of God, do the innermost sanctum in those old archaeological sites were called the Holy of Holies. And so the question is, if we're temples, do we have a Holy of Holies? Well, we have not one. We've got 50 trillion because the nucleus of every cell has the DNA that contains the information of our divinity. And from this, and maybe this is where we wrap this part of our conversation, I think our greatest level of mastery, the highest level of mastery, and probably our job is to preserve and protect and honor and cherish the gift of the temple that holds the message of our divinity in a time when we our humanness is being denigrated, and we're being encouraged and coerced and mandated to give our humanness away. So anyone seeing this, if you're here in this world now, you're here for this very moment to preserve and protect, I think, the gift of what it means to be human, to celebrate that, and hopefully even have a deeper appreciation after you read the book and have this conversation of our humanness, and to recognize, not to judge and not to be angered, but to recognize the attempts to steal our humanness away in exchange for efficiency and speed and logic of technology. That's the high price. The question is, and this is where I'll end, do we love ourselves enough to accept the deep truth of what it means to be human and to accept our divinity? Our actions speak the answer without using any words.
Gregg, where can people find the book and find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing?
This book was released a couple of weeks ago, wherever books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, I know. Other.
And the title?
The title is called Pure Human, The Hidden Truth of Our Divinity, Power, and Destiny. And interesting, I went into a recording studio and I recorded the audio version. That's 100% my voice. It's selling stronger than the hardback book.
Oh, yeah, always. Yeah, the audiobooks are going much, much faster than the
So
old
that's where they're found. You can go to my website, Gregg Braden, GreggBraden.com, and there's some books there as well. So. And
do you have any parting messages for the audience?
I think we covered it. I want to thank you for the community that you have created. You are a hub for this beautiful community and my family, helping us to remember all the different facets of our potential and what it means to be human. I want to thank you for your trust, because again, you never know precisely what a guest is going to say, and you bring us here anyway. And I think this is the most important thing, is to preserve and protect the gift of our humanness in a world where that's not always a popular thing to do.
Gregg, it is always a pleasure and an honor speaking to you, sir. Until the next time, I appreciate you and everything you're doing to awaken this planet, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.